my name is Jackson, and we coming back to thank you guys for coming back to my videos. And yeah, uh, the whole idea of me doing this is that I like having people learning, so I'm doing this just for anyone really that wants to learn new things, especially when it comes to programming. Um, So, if you have any areas that you would like me to touch when it comes to mobile development as well as backend development, you guys can put your comments you can put your comments below, and I will decide on which videos to actually make. All right, so let's get started. So in the previous video, what I decided to do was just to set up our project, just putting together the structure for our project, and setting up our npm and all the libraries that we're going to be needing. And yeah, all right, so today we're actually going to be talking about how to connect to the database and creating the tables. um, so what I had in mind was actually this structure. Just going to explain a little bit about the project that we're going to be working on, and how everything's going to be structured. With time, it will definitely evolve, but as a start for us to get started on getting some code running, I'm going to show you the structure of the database that we're going to be working with. So the idea is we're going to have a student that has an ID. This ID is we doing like an auto increment so that it doesn't clash with anyone. And you have the name, the surname, the student number. We are actually going to edit this to make it a var address. It's going to be a unique value in the table, so you can use your student number as your unique identifier, so as your primary key in this student table. And every student has an email, a phone number, and a password, so this is going to be used for logging in and to log in as a student. All right, then we have a teachers table that is almost the same structure as a student, but the only difference is we're not going to have a student number for the teachers. So their email in this situation is going to be their login component that they're going to be using. We're going to write a little bit about they can either log in with their email or with their phone number. Then we have courses. So I decided to make it as simple as possible. So we have a course, and the course has an ID, a course name, and the T. So we're going to be linking the teacher um, who is what do you call this? Who's registered in this table is going to be teaching one course. So one teacher teaches one course. And now we have a student course link. So this is where when we say like a student should be able to identify which courses are they doing. So this link shows that a student, which is this link there, that student ID there, going to write what the structure of these tables look like inside our models. Yeah, so we have our student.js. Now we are going to write the structure of a student. So the structure for our student, we're going to export a module. Module dot export is equal to a function. So this function will take a serialize and the data types that we can use. Right now we are going to say sequelize dot define. Now, so remember when we started, we said it's best to have the name of your tables being the name of your functions as well. So if you check in here, we're actually going to call it student, right? Student. And this is already a mistake. Oh, this is actually fine. Then we are going to now define the fields that are in the student object. So in the student object we have an ID, then our ID, it's actually our primary key, but what data type is it? It's an integer. So we say we give it a type, and we actually invoke the data type of integer there. So I usually make all my primary keys 11, just an old habit, but it can go all the way to a length of 255, right? Then we have a name. Oh, I'm sorry, we're still defining our ID. Then this is going to be a primary key. We need to give it a true. And so to avoid the primary keys ever overlapping, we allow auto increment on the ID. So if you insert something, it automatically gives it the next available number. So that will be managed by our database, and we don't have to manage the assignment of IDs. So we're going to say auto increment. We're going to set it to true. Yeah, so this is the simplest way to make an object to define a student. Now we're going to have the name. So we're going to do the same, but the only difference now is you can see it's going to be a varchar, yeah, with a length of 45. But in Sequelize, what you actually do is in the type you say data type dot string. You say dot string, and you give it 45. If you give it the length, it automatically creates this this data structure for name. But when sometimes you don't know, for example, if you an example is when the structure of an email, you never know how big the text is going to be, so you'd rather have it you'd rather give it a data type of text. It does have limitations, but it gives you more space to store your data if it is unknown. But for our name, we're going to use 45. Then we're going to say allow now. We're going to say false. So that means we'll never allow now on that name. All right. Then we have our surname. All right. I'm going to just copy this because it's the same structure. Then what else do we have? Student number. We have a student number there. Student number. We're just going to use the same structure. Then we have an email address. I'm going to use the same structure, but it has what do you call this? So it does come with validations as well, so you can put a validate here, but I'll look at it. I'll go back. I won't lie, I haven't really read up on the validations. I sort of do the validations in the actual processing of the data before actually inserting the information. um, so I will look at validations, and in the next video I'll come back and actually do the validations on the email. All right, then we have a phone number. We have a phone number there. We're going to have that same structure, and we're going to have a password. We're going to have the same structure. Now you need to take note that for your passwords, if you are going to hash information, you might have a maximum number of characters, and if they exceed 45, it's best to use text, or you actually specify the number of characters that are going to that are going to be used. All right, now we have defined a student. Here, and now we need to tell it what table name is it. Is the table. You need to write your table name. Our table name, we're going to call it student. We're going to call it student in here, and there is another option called timestamps, right? So this shows if when something is updated, it automatically creates an updated or it updates the column on updated date or updated time, and it creates another column called created on, created at, not on, created at, and it gives you the information about when the record was placed in the database. So if you put it to true, it's going to create those things. Now, so this is going to be the structure for a student, and we are going to work with the student first, then we'll come back to the other links that are happening if I have time in this video. Okay, so now that you have defined what a student looks like, you need to define how the information is going to be inserted right into the database, and that is handled by this index.js. That's going to be we did define the entry point as app.index.js, but this is actually the file that runs it runs the whole project. So we need a file we are going to call database, and that database is actually this information that was created by that initialization of SQL.CLI. Alright, so I think I did touch on this in the previous video a little bit, and yeah, we're going to be connecting to our host there, and our port and our dialect being MySQL, and the configuration file is this, and we did say we're going to be using school as our database. All right, now this we're going to go, it's going to look for the models inside app models, so it's going to look for all the files in here. So that's where it becomes very useful to define these names, because it's easier to manage that way, so that the name of the file goes together with the name of your table. Okay, all right, so now I'm going to show you. So we defined how the structure of a student table looks like. We are going to use SQLite to do what we call a migration. A migration is updating the database through the JavaScript. So the good thing about this process is you don't allow anyone to go into the database and actually change anything directly, because it becomes a nightmare when you want to synchronize databases among multiple developers. But if you have like files that actually do the migration, then each developer can get those files and run the migration, and they will be up to date with the new release of a code, for example. So to create a migration, you say SQLize .cli migration create. So the first migration that we're going to create is make student table, right? So migration oh yeah, so you need your SQLize -cli there, but you need to define that the name of the file that I'm creating is this. So it automatically creates your migration in here. So what happens in here is when you're doing an app, it's you are creating, it's how the database is changing. That's where you define it. But also when you're doing it down, it's sort of like deleting. So it's better to to do all your everything in up, but you can always do it down if you need to delete a few things. Excuse me. All right, so this function returns, it returns ooh, it returns it's running away from me. It does return a promise. It returns a promise. It requires you to return a promise. So what you can do is you can return promise all. Is it promise all? Promise all. Long. Therefore, I'm going to split it into two because I don't want to create one long video. And so this will be part one of setting up the structure and doing my one simple migration. So I'll upload both of them at the same time. Yeah, so the second video is going to start with doing the actual migration of the database, and this first one was setting up the structure in the database JavaScript file. All right.